Robert, so good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, so excited to be on your show.
Where are you today?
In San Jose, in my home in Silicon Valley.
Man, I love your home office setup. It looks great.
I'm right in the middle of the kitchen.
Looks good.
My wife works at home too. She's in her office in the back, and I have my space out in the middle of the house. So,
Well, I so appreciate you taking time. This is a very, very special episode for me, Robert, for a couple different reasons. As you know, we caught up a couple weeks back and we had this wonderful conversation. I was able to share what a big impact you had on my career. And, I first discovered you through Jason Calacanis's Twitter feed.
Oh, wow.
Probably like 2007, and he was retweeting these video blogs that you were making, and you were interviewing these founders, and I was just completely enamored and mesmerized. I mean, there was this energy, and you were just so like you were surfing the emerging future.
Still am.
Yeah, and
now I'm doing marketing for a stealth mode robotics company. So I still am.
Yeah. And, and kind of fast forward, Jason Calacanis invited us to present at TechCrunch 50 in 2009. That was sort of the predated TechCrunch Disrupt. And we ended up making finals with our little 311 mobile app, city sourced. We were trying to promote civic engagement so people can, take photos of things, graffiti, potholes, and send it, geotag it, send it to the city. And we ended up making third place and got a lot of attention. And you outreached to us and invited us on your podcast or your blog. And I remember we sat in our CMO's home office in San Francisco, and he didn't even have any furniture. And we sat on the floor. And you were like, this is the
a real startup.
Yeah, totally.
Doesn't even have money to buy furniture.
And then I remember we ended up having some issues with that recording, and you had us come, we did it again, and and it was Rocky.
Yeah.
And you guys were so cool. And it was like, for me, it was like, wow, like this was a big milestone and a lot of validation. And, I would imagine that my story is pretty common, that for folks that were trying to break into the market, getting to some time and to be on your show is a big validator. And that actually helped us. From that, we got calls from Sequoia and you name it, and a lot of relationships. Even now, my best customer at Hunt Club is Mark Dempster, former head of marketing at Sequoia. And we took a meeting with him very much in part because of your blog. So I thank you so much.
Thanks. No, that's the good old days now.
So we have a lot
back then the media landscape was quite different. I mean, now you have Twitter's all built out and Facebook and LinkedIn. Back then there wasn't strong channels for startups to get their ideas heard by people, right?
Yeah.
I was the first one to link to TechCrunch, right? So my blog was around before TechCrunch, before Product Hunt, before Angel List, right? And, Y Combinator, I don't think it even started, right? They started later. And so there was just not that ecosystem for startups that there is today,
Yeah.
So
real quick, we're going to pause. Go ahead and grab your hat up and pull your hair back a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you filming? Are you doing video?
Yeah, well, we're gonna. This is all audio, but we might do a couple video clips to promote. Okay. Yeah, you look great. I just want to make you look great. Yeah. So Levi, we're gonna edit that out, obviously. Okay. So I think that's a great segue, Robert, to rewind a bit. So catch us up. You grew up in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, my dad was an engineer, and he got a PhD at Rutgers and moved us here in 1971. To work at Ampex, which made the first VCR and made recording equipment, tape recording equipment. We don't even use tapes anymore. What the hell is a tape? but yeah, that's what got us to Cupertino, California in 1971.
It's
And this
amazing.
little company called Apple started in 1976,
What do you remember your first computer?
It was an Apple II. In fact, we built Apple IIs at home. My mom had a job with Hildy Licht here in the Valley. She's still in business. She does contract manufacturing with housewives in the Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And so Apple ran out of manufacturing capabilities in their own factories. And so they hired Hildy Licht to build extra motherboards. And my mom had a whole setup in the kitchen, and she would solder the boards, and the kids would earn an allowance by stuffing the boards. So I've seen quite, hundreds of Apple II motherboards in my day.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it's a fun story.
Or
But yeah, my
growing
dad
up,
bought an Apple II in 1977, and I was at Junior High in the first computer club in Cupertino, and they bought Apple IIs in 1977.
wow,
So
talk about ground zero and sort of, kind of right place, right time in the right community. What were there similar to how you had a big impact on me and even folks like, you knew I worked at Esri, you got to work for Jack Dangerman, CEO there for a long time. And
yeah,
he had a big impact on my career. Are there people that you met early on that
yeah.
were that for you?
In 1989, I was at West Valley Community College, and I kept seeing a car with the license plates of Woz, and that's Apple's co-founder's car. And I was like, what is Apple co-founder doing at a community college? That's not where you think you would find, somebody who started the richest company in the world, right? So I started waking up earlier and earlier until I got there before his car did. He's a very engineered, very structured person. He parked in the same parking space at exactly the same time every morning. so I started meeting him at his car. I got an interview with him for the school newspaper because I was a journalism student back then, and started studying with him, and then pitched him on, hey, can I get on your list for old computers, because I know you get hand-me-downs because you get the latest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back then in '89, he showed me his dye sublimation color printer. It cost $45,000. It was the first color printer I'd seen, and he bought a 400 megabyte RAM drive for $45,000 also to run Photoshop 1.0. And so, man, if I could get, in 3 years when you get a new one, if I could get that, that'd be cool. And he went off. He ended up donating about $40,000 worth of stuff to our Macintoshes to our journalism department. And our journalism teacher made me set him up because I got all these five really nice computers for our journalism department. So.
Wow, Steve Wozniak, what a great story.
Yeah. I mean, that's something you can't do with a Stanford education. You can't study with Steve Wozniak for every morning for a semester, right?
What was
what good is your $70,000 a year? I guess.
I know. I mean, talk about a social engineering hack. That's brilliant. What about Steve left a really big impact? Like what was sort of like the top insight that comes to mind that you learned from him?
He was the guy who designed the motherboards I was building as a 13-year-old or 14-year-old for my mom. And I remember thinking those were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, right? The design of the motherboard was really, really beautiful to look at. It was technological. It was futuristic. It was, I'd never seen anything like that before because there wasn't anything like that before, right? And so, yeah, he was the last human being to have an entire computer in his head, right? Since then, it's impossible. It's impossible to even design one little tiny piece of a processor today as a human being. It's just too complex, right? So, but he's very structured, you can see his genius, how he approaches the world and how he memorizes things and how he approaches life. I mean, parking in the same parking space, coming at the same exact time every morning. That shows you how structured he was, right?
What is there a example of where you were able to kind of borrow from that in your approach to the world?
Not there. I was a journalism student, so and I always liked technology. So that's when I got to San Jose State, that's sort of where I went. I took the Macintosh skills I
Yep.
got at a community college setting up 5 computers, and then I set up 100 at San Jose State. I actually ended up working for the university doing that. So I, you know, was is a hard person to copy because you're not going to go and build a motherboard, and I don't have that brain.
Yeah, but like for what maybe like a sort of a
Looking at
primitive
electronic stuff.
example of that is like your Twitter list. Like you do such a good job. Anybody listening, you want to sort of get X-ray into Silicon Valley. Go to, if you're not already following Robert, go to his Twitter and check out his Twitter list. And I think that's like, talk about a systems thinking of a network. I mean,
It's
that's
been many years, right? Because I
yeah,
still keep adding to them or deleting people, from them.
yeah.
They don't, like, I have a list of investors, about 5,000 investors, right? So every once in a while, every year or so, I go through the list looking for dead, literally dead people. I've removed dead people who've died. My producer, we talked about, died a couple of years ago, right? So
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
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 R.I.P. Rocky. He was such a great soul. God bless him.
yeah. He made a big impact on the world, and
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I went through life my own way. Yeah, I tried to take lessons from him where I could, but we're very different. I mean, I was talking to him a month ago about our childhoods, and my dad had an electronics lab in the garage, right? And he would bring home parts from Lockheed Martin. He ended up working at Lockheed Martin building military satellites for 30 years. And uh, I figured out if you plugged capacitors into the wall, so if you took a plug and unwrapped it and put the leads on the end of a capacitor and plugged it in the wall, the capacitor would blow up. And I was talking to Waz. He's like, "Yeah, I did the same thing, but then the difference between me and him is he can explain why it blows up, and tell you what the electrons are doing when it's going through the capacitor at a high rate, And so I don't know,
Well, I think that's a great sort of like example of part of the spirit of the show. The positioning is unique perspectives shaping the world, and we're all uniquely special. Like that's sort of the paradox I think of human experiences. We all have same biological wiring and the function works the same, but our experience has a lot of overlap, but we're all uniquely different. And I think that's a great segue into like your career. So you studied journalism
yeah.
at San Diego State.
No, San Jose State.
San Jose State.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Because it was on the bus
yeah,
line from my dad's house.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Didn't have the money to buy a car back then.
What about journalism captured your imagination, or what was it that moved you down that path?
I was actually trying to study computer science at the beginning because my dad always wanted me to get a technical degree, right?
Yeah.
And because he was an engineer and saw it, his degree took us out of poverty and to the place where I'm talking to you right now. Do you hear that, by the way, in the background?
No.
Okay, good. The microphones on the iMac are pretty good. The new iMac. Where were we going with that?
Oh, your dad took you guys out of poverty
by going to school, right? And so he wanted me to do the same thing. He wanted me to get a technical degree, a degree in engineering or something like that. And I tried, and I got through 2 years of calculus, right? Because computer science, you need a fair bit of math to really do stuff, that's useful. And I just didn't like the math. I hated the math. And then the '89 earthquake hit, and that gelled it for me. I like writing stories. I like telling people what the news is. I like, reporting. I like meeting people. I like understanding new things. The computer science just wasn't working for me. And so I switched in '89 from trying to be a computer scientist to journalism. And since then, I've interviewed, I don't know, thousands of entrepreneurs all over the world. So, like you're one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's about 6,000 people I interviewed. It's crazy. Later, I got a job at Microsoft and was in the strategy and evangelism team, and even there, I interviewed 600 employees at Microsoft, from Bill Gates to the janitor and a bunch of people in between. And so that's a pretty unique view of the world. I don't know any other human that gets to do that unless they're an executive, and they have to meet with a lot of people. But most everyday employees don't get to meet 600 people inside of a big company and understand how it works.
I love that. What was special about Bill Gates? What sort of
he's so smart. He inhales information and he can spit it back to you 6 months later. He just has a photographic memory, and a memory a brain that's pretty unique. Yeah, I mean, by the time I met Bill, he'd been running a big company for a while. Microsoft, and so I don't know what he was like as a kid, but as an entrepreneur in the early 2000s, he's a pretty impressive person to talk with. I sat under his feet shooting pictures for 45 minutes at TED, and while talking to him about nuclear power, and he's like knows more about nuclear power than my dad did, and my dad worked in nuclear materials, right, all his life. So he built the radiation shielding on military satellites up above our heads.
That's incredible. So that's part of the spirit of the show too, is learning out loud. Get to learn. I sort of feel like I'm the beneficiary of all this. I get to sort of vacuum up all these insights. Jack Dangermond at Esri has sort of a photographic memory, and I asked him one time how he did it, and he said because he was oriented spatially, he's a mapping guy, cartographer. And there's sort of this. I think the Greek orators did this, to sort of the palace of the mind, and everything sort of in a spatial orientation, which I think it kind of we'll get into more spatial discussion later.
No, but they're called memory palaces, and I took a Dale Carnegie class, and that's one of the techniques they used to help you memorize things. If you put it in, a physical thing and put words on the physical things that you're building in your mind, you can memorize things. Like they would say, take a coffee cup, put a word like, Kurt is the name I need to remember. It's on my coffee cup, right? It's easier for your mind to remember things that way, right?
Yeah. There's some kind of neural connectivity. I wonder if in the future there'll be some kind of Google Glass augmentation where that we sort of have a little filing cabinet where some of this stuff goes.
The people who are building augmented reality know the memory palaces very well, and they're thinking about how can you augment the human brain and help people remember things that way. Yeah, absolutely. Not to mention, soon you won't need to remember where your keys are.
Yeah. Well, thank God for find my crap on my phone here.
Yeah, my keys are over there. I have an air tag on my keys. You'll never lose my keys anymore.
Yeah, it's amazing. Douglas Merrill is here in LA, and I've known him for a while, and he was former VP of engineering at Google early days.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book about, I can't remember the title, but it was all like he had all these hacks on how to use Google. And I was sort of like a precursor to this idea about even, using Gmail as a way to just send yourself little notes so you can remind yourself things. And it's wild. I think, the imagination and what you could think of is a beautiful thing. So you worked at Microsoft. That was a great gig. And then you worked at Rackspace for a long time as well, right?
I actually left to join a media startup that's gone now, but that was interesting. Jeremiah Ouyang and Steve Gilmore, who's now at Salesforce, we're all in that startup. And John Furrier ran the startup. He now runs a different company. So yeah, a lot of things happen in a little tiny startup. And then in 2009, when the .com bust happened, I was working at Fast Company and had to lay off Rocky. And Rocky got the job at Rackspace and then called me up and said, "You got to come to Rackspace with me." And I'm like, okay. It's like the Fast Company gig is really miserable. So let's go.
So what year was that? The Fast Company?
Around 2009.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's when I
And then I
met you.
worked at Rex.
I met you in '09, and
Yeah.
that was an interesting time because that was sort of the Web 2.0 was coming online.
Yeah.
I remember
And the
like
rest of the world was really going through struggles, right? Banks were going
yeah,
out of business, and
yeah, the great financial crisis. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean we ended up raising in 2010. Jack at Esri wrote us. He was our lead investor, and it was $1.3 million Series A in 2010, and that was actually kind of a big deal at the time.
yes.
You know,
Remember when Color raised like $40 million, and everybody says that's obscene. That's an
yeah.
obscene amount of cash. How can a startup deal with that much
I
cash?
know, I know.
It's
And then
like,
they ended up
it's
giving it
now.
back. That was
But now
hilarious.
that's like I saw funding yesterday of $40 million, and it's like nobody even cares,
Yeah.
anymore at that kind of fundraising. Yeah.
Yeah, we doing a bunch of work with Andreessen, and they have this new seed vertical, and there's for their 10 to $15 million seed checks.
Isn't that crazy? $10 to $15 million seed. That's not seed. That's like a series. We should just rebrand everything. Like that's like Series A. Really, that's not friends and family money
Yeah,
anymore.
I know it's pretty wild.
Unless you got billionaire friends. I don't have many billionaire friends who give me money. So
So through this whole time, so when did the Scobleizer blog start?
2000. So
Okay.
really early. My wife and I worked at a company, a magazine company. She wasn't my wife back then. We were working in conferences, and we were planning the CNETbuilder.com live conference under contract at Fawcett. And several of my speakers, Dave Weiner, who I actually ended up working with 2 years later, and Dory Smith told me, "Oh, we should do a session on blogging," because I was talking to all the speakers and saying, "What should we do new this year that we didn't do last year?" Oh, the blogging is hot. And I went to this new thing called Google. Right, Google was brand new in '98, so this was '99. And I was like, "There's only 200 blogs. What are you talking about? It's not hot." I mean,